Welcome back, guys. I'm Zell, and today it's time to get a look inside the Viper Storm, that Hinderer that gave me problems a couple weeks ago. And this one came in a few days ago, and it is loads better. So let's jump right into it. My only issue is it was just a few hairs off center. So that's the lock side. Everything on here except the clip is T8, so we're going to take these apart. We'll get a look at the screws and see what we've got, but I can already tell you that we have nice deep recesses with well done cuts. You know, whatever machine they're using to make those screws, or mill or lathe or CNC workstation, whatever, it's a very, very good one because it's doing the job right. Same thing here, and everything, like I said, everything's T8, so that is very convenient. And we're going to see if we can, this is a double-sided pivot. You got a sleeve with 2 torque screws going in it. We're going to see if we can get it apart just from one side. And there we go. So let's get a look inside this thing. Very nice stuff here. We don't have a standard stop pin. We have these little races or a recess, whatever you want to call it there. And we have a stop pin on the blade, very much like Leon Ma does most of his stuff, and several others. I think most of Isaiah's Isham's stuff is done that way as well. Is it any better or any worse? You know, I'm not going to do the math for the torsional loads, blah, 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 blah. But I think it works just fine. And you have to have some pretty precision milling for that to work out, though, because you're working on 2 completely opposite sides making large cuts. A little more complicated. Anyhow, let's get into getting this thing apart. And if I remember right, yeah, this thing's kind of a pain to get apart because all the parts fit very tightly. Now, here is one of the more interesting things. We have a little race on this bushing. And that little race, of course, fits against our little bearings. And we'll pop that bearing out of there and see if we can get these off. That thing is tight, boys and girls. That fitting on that bushing is very, very tight. But there we go. And I'm going to get a little acetone. And we're just going to rub everything down. We don't have any finishes to be worried about here. So I'm going to use the acetone because it makes the oil go away a little better. If you have finishes like DLC coatings, all that kind of stuff, I'm going to suggest that you use some sort of alcohol. It doesn't have to be 91% or denatured or anything. It can be your general stuff you get at the Walgreens, the CVS, or Walmart, or whatever. And it'll work just fine. Now, what I normally do with the alcohol, and I don't have a spray bottle of it down here right now, but I usually take the alcohol and put it in a spray bottle, or put a sprayer tip on the top of that bottle that it comes in. And I get the big bottles because, well, I go through a lot of the junk. And there we go. And a little tip on buying your alcohol or acetone, either one. If you have CVS, Walmart, and Walgreens, and that's basically what we've got around here to, you know, buy that kind of stuff. Walmart is always going to be cheap. CVS and Walgreens are always going to be expensive unless they have the stuff on sale. And if they have the big bottles of whatever type of alcohol you're looking for, or acetone on sale, they will be way cheaper than Walmart. So, you know, there you go. Now, I don't worry about that so much anymore because I buy my acetone and most of the time the alcohol in big jugs because, well, I use a lot of it. But there we go. This is our Viper Storm. Let's look at some of the neat things they've done here. We've got an internal milling cutout here for the lock bar, and that's just nice. It keeps the outside of the knife consistent. We've got a little counter board there for the pivot screws to ride in. And let's get a look at this blade. I really like this blade. What they've done here is, I'm assuming that's a stone wash of some sort, but they have polished this thing up and then given it that stone wash, and then they may have lightly buffed it. I'm not exactly sure. All I know is it comes out really nice and really hard to get on camera. And there's our stop pin right there. Like we said, it goes through these little channels in the blade. One other interesting note is some of you know, and now we're all going to know, is the Sabenza, which I don't have here on the desk. The little hole in the end of the Sabenza that seems to serve no purpose. Oh, that's a locating hole. Chris Reeves said that himself quite some time ago. And it's simply so that they can set that thing in the mill in a fixture, drop the clamp on it, and the clamp goes in a very specific place, which I don't know where that is, and run whatever operations they have in the mill. It's a very simple way to do things. Same here. We've got two little recesses. And my guess is that there are two little pins on the fixture for the mill to cut this piece of liner or frame, whatever you want to call it. And the operator goes over, slides the slab, or sets the slab down on those pins. There's some other machine that cuts the pins, or maybe even the same machine. And whenever it's on the pins, it's in the fixture. Pop a little clamp on it, and off the mill goes, whatever type of CNC mill they have, and voila, you end up with your frame or your liners. So that is kind of neat. It's in both sides. We got these little holes, and we didn't take this little guy off, and we should do that because we want to get a look at those spools. I call them spools, backspacer, or not really backspacer, but spacers, standoffs. But that's what is holding your little backspacer in place. And the way it works is very simple, and we can get a good look at this. Slides on there. You take your little Allen wrench that you don't want to lose because it's a really dinky one and you have to buy a more expensive set to get that one. And as you can see, the little Allen screw goes on this side of this little spool and holds everything in place. Another close fit little thing there, so there's a lot of fairly intricate milling in this knife. Not that there isn't in other knives, but it's rather ambitious for a production company to take on something like this, and like this fit here. And that fit can't be very loose. The stop pin tracks where you have to mill both sides out exactly, or things don't work right. And this little race inside the hardened steel washers that go behind the bearings. All that's pretty impressive. So let's get it back together and see what we end up with. We're going to start with this side. We need our little bushing. And what we got? We got 85 weight. We want that here in a minute. Here's our 10 weight. And I'm going to put the bearing on with the race up, and I'll show you why I'm doing that here in just a moment when we get to the other side. Dribble a little oil down in there. Don't go overboard on this knife. Don't nick-shabazz this stuff, because on this knife we're dealing with a carbidized titanium lock interface, and you don't want any oil on that. Now here's where we're gonna use that 85 weight oil, and I'm just gonna put a drop, a very small drop down in that. I'm not on the track, just in the detent hole, because I want that little ball to pick up the oil, but I don't want that oil spreading all over the place. As we get it down on here, too much of it, we've got a problem. So now, why I put that race face up and now I'm going to put it face down. What I'm doing is putting the open side of the race near the blade, because that blade has counterbores in it for the, which means a recess for the bearing to sit down in there. And that's a beautiful thing. The only thing here is we probably should have put a little bit of that 10 weight oil on there before I set it down. So we'll go ahead and do that. Once again, want to be careful with the oiling of this thing, because we don't want to get oil down in that lock interface. Set our race back there on the back side of it, and see if we can pull this off. Let's put, oh boy, I think it worked. So from here, we want to put these guys back in. And I am not putting Loctite on any of these screws for a very specific reason. If I was doing this just for myself, I would have got some Vibratite for the pivot, some Loctite for the body screws, and been done with it for a good long time. But since we're doing this as a review knife, and there wasn't any Loctite anywhere on this knife from the factory, I want to see for you guys if this knife is going to stay together without the Loctite. Find out what the quality of those screws. See how good a quality screw we have, because that's rather important. And my dogs are outside right now, and they really want to come inside if you're hearing that banging. Pivot adjusted. There we go. And by doing that, looks like we've taken care of our slide off center. Looks really good right now. Let's see how well that stays. And that's it, guys. That's what's inside the Viper Storm designed by Rick Hinderer. It's a pretty neat knife, a fairly intricately designed knife, and blade finish is just beautiful. We'll get to the full review here in a few days. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me and getting a look inside the Viper Storm. And you have a wonderful day. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.